No one in room 3C was prepared when a trembling little girl whispered the words that froze the entire class. "I can't sit. My dad did this." The sentence sliced through the morning chatter like lightning. "Miss..." Thandika's marker fell from her hand. 26 students turned in unison, their faces twisting from confusion to fear, as Zuri, usually quiet, always polite, remained standing beside her desk, knees buckling, tears threatening to spill. The air thickened. The class fell into a suffocating silence. Miss Thandika stepped closer, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Zuri, what do you mean your dad did this?" she asked softly, but the girl didn't answer. She simply winced, clutching the edge of the desk, as if sitting meant unbearable pain. 1,000 possibilities raced through the teacher's mind, none of them good. And in that moment she made a silent vow. Whatever Zuri was hiding, she would uncover it, no matter the cost. Before we dive deeper, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? If you enjoy powerful African folktale dramas like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Your support truly means a lot. Miss Thandika couldn't concentrate for the rest of the morning. Even as she continued the lesson, forcing her voice to sound steady, her eyes kept drifting towards Zuri. The little girl sat stiffly, barely moving, wincing each time she adjusted her position. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, her back unnaturally straight, as though leaning too far in any direction would reveal more than she could hide. When the bell rang for break, the other students burst out of the room with the usual energy, but Zuri stayed glued to her seat. She didn't even try to stand. She simply stared at the desk, blinking too quickly, as if forcing herself not to cry. That was the moment Miss Thandika knew she could no longer pretend everything was fine. She walked over slowly, kneeling beside the girl. "Zuri, sweetheart, is there something you want to tell me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Zuri's small shoulders rose and fell. For a moment it looked like she might speak. Her lips parted, trembling, then she shut them again and shook her head violently. The fear in her eyes wasn't the kind that came from being hurt accidentally. It was deeper, conditioned, learned. "I didn't mean to say anything," Zuri whispered finally. "Please, miss. Please forget it. Forget it. That was impossible." To distract her class for the remainder of the day, Miss Thandika kept the activities light: group reading, drawing, simple arithmetic. But the uneasy feeling gnawed at her ribs. She had been a teacher long enough to recognize when something was wrong. Some children were shy, some had difficult home situations. But this was the kind of silence that only came from fear. During lunch, she sat in the staff room, barely touching her food. Her colleague, Mr. Sibusiso, noticed. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, taking the seat across from her. "It's Zuri," she replied. "Something's not right. She can't sit properly, she's trembling, and she said her dad did it." The man's eyebrows shot up. "Her father, Mandla, the one who came to parent-teacher meeting last term, he seems strict, but that's the problem," she interrupted. "It's always the ones who seem something." Sibusiso leaned back with a sigh. "You think you should report it, I'm not sure. I need more than a single sentence. But if I wait too long and she's really in danger..." He nodded, the weight of the situation settling between them like a heavy stone. They both knew the responsibility placed on teachers in cases like this. One wrong step could destroy a family or save a child. Later that afternoon, the schoolyard buzzed with noise as children waited to be picked up. Zuri stood alone, clutching her school bag to her chest. She kept scanning the road, anxiously flinching each time a car approached. Miss Thandika walked to her gently. "Your dad is coming today." Zuri nodded but didn't look up. "And how is he at home?" the teacher asked casually, hoping the relaxed tone would draw the truth out. But Zuri stiffened immediately. "He's fine," she answered too quickly. "He's always fine." "Is he kind to you?" Zuri hesitated. "Yes." "Does he ever shout at you?" A longer pause. "Only when I deserve it." That sentence told Thandika everything she needed to know. The child had been conditioned to believe pain was discipline. She knelt down so her eyes matched the girl's level. "Zuri, you can always talk to me. I'm here to help you." The girl swallowed hard. "If I talk, and bad things will happen." Bad things to who? No answer. Just tears welling behind the girl's lashes. Before Miss Thandika could push further, a battered old pickup truck rattled to a stop outside the school. The door slammed, and a broad-shouldered man stepped out, scruffy beard, weary eyes, a hard expression carved deep into his face. Mandla. Zuri visibly shrank. He approached, his boots scraping against the gravel. "Zuri, move," he barked. "I don't have all day." The child nearly tripped in her rush to obey. She didn't even say goodbye to her teacher. Mr. Manla, Miss Thandeka began stepping forward. May I have a quick word about what he snapped without looking at her? It's about Zuri's health. She's fine, he cut her off. Kids get hurt. Kids complain. Don't start this nonsense with me. His tone was sharp, dismissive, as if he were shutting down a conversation he'd been forced to have one too many times. He yanked open the passenger door, motioning for Zuri to get inside. The girl obeyed instantly, but before she climbed in, she shot Miss Thandeka a look, a pleading, terrified look. It was the kind of look that said, please don't stop trying. That evening, unable to shake off her worry, Miss Thandeka dug deeper. She checked through Zuri's attendance record, multiple late arrivals. Days she left early. Notes about stomachache, headaches, falling at home. Too many signs pointing in one direction. At home, she lay awake on her living room sofa, replaying the scene in her mind. Zuri's whisper, her fear, the stiffness in her body, the panic whenever Manla approached. She couldn't sleep. Teachers often faced a moral conflict, intervened too soon or too late. But the image of Zuri standing in class trembling and whispering, "My dad did this," kept echoing relentlessly. By morning, the decision was made. She would not let this go. The next day, Zuri came to school limping slightly. She tried to mask it, but Miss Thandeka noticed immediately. As the children filed in, she gently touched the girl's arm. "Zuri, stay behind with me after class, okay?" Fear flickered across the child's face, but she nodded. Throughout the morning lessons, Zuri barely spoke. She flinched when a book fell to the floor. She avoided everyone's eyes. And when she bent to pick up a pencil, her shirt lifted just enough for the teacher to glimpse a faint purple mark on her lower back. Not a normal bruise, not an accidental fall. A deliberate strike. Her breath caught. She waited until the bell rang for lunch and the classroom emptied, then closed the door softly behind her. Zuri stood in the corner, hugging herself, waiting like someone awaiting judgment. "Sweetheart," Thandeka said, gently pulling a chair closer. "Are you hurt again?" Zuri shook her head. "Zuri," she continued softly, "I saw the bruise. I'm your teacher. I need to help you." The girl trembled. Tears spilled over. "You can't," she whispered. "If you help me, she'll make it worse." "She?" The pronoun struck like a bolt. "You mean your stepmother?" Miss Thandeka asked carefully. Zuri froze, and her silence was confirmation. The teacher's heart sank. "Does she hurt you?" she asked. Zuri's breath hitched. "Please don't make me say it," she whispered. "Please." Thandeka reached out, covering the girl's hands with her own. "You are not in trouble, Zuri. You did nothing wrong. Whatever is happening at home, you don't deserve it." Zuri shook harder. She said, "If anyone asks, I must say Dad did it, or else." She stopped. A broken child with more fear inside her tiny frame than any child should carry. Miss Thandeka felt fury rising behind her ribs. Fury at the stepmother, fury at Manla, for allowing this, fury at the silence that kept Zuri trapped. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "I'm going to protect you, I promise." For the first time, Zuri looked up. "Promise," she whispered, as though promises were dangerous things. "Yes," Thandeka replied. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." But even as she said it, a new fear crept into her chest. Because from here on, everything was going to explode. This was no longer a quiet suspicion. This was the beginning of war. The next morning began with a heaviness that clung to the air long before the first bell rang. Miss Thandeka sat at her desk, early fingers interlocked mentally, preparing for the conversation she knew she had to continue. She wasn't sure what Zuri would reveal today, but she sensed the child was standing on the edge of breaking, and if she fell alone, no one might ever know the truth. When Zuri entered the classroom, she was moving slower than usual. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, her eyes swollen, as if she cried through the night. She avoided everyone's gaze, walking straight to her seat and lowering herself gingerly as though every movement sent pain shooting up her spine. The other children chattered happily around her, unaware of the war brewing beneath her quiet surface. Miss Thandeka watched her closely. Her instinct told her that today might be the day Zuri finally opened up, or the day fear crushed her completely. Sometime during the morning math lesson, a group activity began. Students pushed their desks together, forming groups of 4. Everyone scrambled except Zuri, who stayed frozen in her seat, her small hands gripping the chair like anchors. Zuri, one of her classmates, a cheerful girl named Ayanda, called out, "Come join our group." Zuri's eyes widened in panic. She shook her head quickly. Ayanda frowned. "Come on, it's fun." I can't," Zuri whispered. Ayanda tugged gently on her arm. "It's just moving to another desk." "Come." The moment Zuri tried to rise, she gasped sharply. one hand clutching her lower back. The sound, small but sharp, cut through the room. A few students turned. Some whispered. The movement had lifted the back of her shirt just a little, just enough for a dark bruise to peek out. Ayanda's eyes grew round. "What happened to your back?" she asked softly. Zuri jerked away as though burned. "It's nothing," she insisted. But it wasn't nothing, and the classroom felt it. The whispers spread. A few children exchanged glances. Some stared openly. Zuri's cheeks flushed with humiliation, and she sank back into her seat, shoulders curling inward like a shield. Miss Thandeka stepped in immediately. "All right, class, eyes on your work. Let's focus on the assignment." Her tone cut the whispers short. She approached Zuri slowly. "Zuri, come with me." The girl hesitated, but the look in her teacher's eyes was gentle, not demanding, not judgmental. With a small nod, she followed Thandeka out of the classroom, walking stiffly as though each step hurt. In the quiet of the empty counseling room, sunlight filtered through the windows, painting warm stripes across the carpet. The soft atmosphere was intentional, a sanctuary for moments like this. Zuri stood near the wall, hands clasped together, twisting the fabric of her skirt nervously. "Sit wherever you're comfortable," Thandeka said softly. "I'll stand," Zuri murmured. The teacher sighed inwardly. Even sitting was a source of pain for this child. She pulled up a chair and sat facing her. "Zuri, sweetheart, I want to help you. But you need to tell me what's happening at home." The girl's chin quivered. Her eyes darted around the room as if checking for escape routes. "Nothing is happening," she whispered. Zuri, Thandeka said gently but firmly, "You don't get bruises like that from nothing. And yesterday, you said your father did something to you." Zuri squeezed her eyes shut. Tears slipped out. "I didn't mean to say that," she whispered. "Please don't tell anyone." "But why would you say it unless—" "Because—" She stopped clenching her fists. "Because I had to." Her voice broke. Miss Thandeka leaned forward. "Did your father hurt you?" Zuri shook her head violently. "No. Please. He'll get in trouble. I don't want him to." This surprised Thandeka. Most abused children didn't defend their abusers so fiercely unless something deeper was happening. "Then who is hurting you?" she asked slowly. Zuri's lips trembled. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked terrified, more terrified than before. I can't say," she choked out. She said, "If I say, she'll make me sit on." She cut herself off abruptly, covering her mouth with both hands as if she had just betrayed herself. Thandeka's pulse quickened. So it wasn't the father. Before she could ask, more footsteps echoed down the hall. Zuri's eyes widened in fear. "Is that her? Is she here?" No, Thandeka reassured quickly. "You're safe here." The child shook uncontrollably, backing toward the corner. "Zuri, no one will hurt you." "I'm right here," she said, stepping forward. But Zuri pressed her small body against the wall, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You don't understand," she whispered. "No one can protect me from her." The teacher gently placed her hands on the child's shoulders. "Zuri, I promise you, I will." For a moment, Zuri looked like she almost believed her. But before she could speak again, a knock sounded on the door. Both of them flinched. The principal's voice came from outside. "Thandeka, are you in there? We need you for a moment." Thandeka cursed under her breath. The timing couldn't be worse. She opened the door slightly. "Can it wait? It's regarding the parent meeting schedule," the principal said. "It will only take a minute." She had no choice. "Zuri, wait right here. I'll be back immediately." The girl nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. But fear lingered in her eyes like a shadow. When Thandeka returned 2 minutes later, the room was empty. Zuri was gone. Panic surged through her. She rushed into the hallway, scanning every direction. A few students walked by chatting. A teacher passed with an armful of papers, but no Zuri. Then she spotted the small figure outside near the gate, walking toward a familiar old pickup truck. Manla had arrived early. He was leaning against the truck, arms folded, eyes narrowed at the school building. His posture radiated irritation. Zuri walked toward him stiffly, wiping her face repeatedly, trying to remove any trace of tears. Zuri, Thandeka called, rushing toward them. The girl froze. Manla turned. His expression darkened. "You again," he said sharply. "Why are you chasing my daughter? She wasn't supposed to leave yet," Thandeka replied, breathless. "We were having a conversation." "Well, the conversation is over." Manla grabbed Zuri's wrist. "Get in the truck." Zuri obeyed instantly. "Mr. Manla," Thandeka said, stepping forward. "I need to talk to you about—" "No. You stay out of my business," he snapped. "My daughter is fine. She doesn't need anything from you." Zuri looked at her teacher through the open truck door. Her eyes were full of silent apologies, silent pleas, silent fear. Then the door slammed shut, and the truck drove off. That evening, Thandeka paced her living room. The scene replayed in her mind. Every step of Zuri's walk, every bruise she'd glimpsed, every terrified look, every word choked back. Her phone buzzed. A message from her colleague Sibusiso. "Everything all right? You left school looking worried." She stared at the text. Then she made a decision that pushed her heart into her throat. She typed back, "I'm going to report the case. I think Zuri is in serious danger." There was no turning back now. She grabbed her coat, her car keys, and a folder with Zuri's attendance notes and the behavior patterns she had documented. She didn't know exactly what storm she was about to unleash, but she knew one thing. She was done watching from the sidelines. Tonight, the fight for Zuri's safety would begin. The report wasn't something Miss Thandeka filed lightly. Teachers were trained to follow procedures, gather evidence, document behavior, but when a child's safety was at risk, hesitation could be deadly. Late that night, under the dim light of her study lamp, she typed every detail she'd observed over the past 2 months. Zuri's bruises, her avoidance of physical contact, constant flinching, sudden withdrawal, and the painful sentence whispered in class that morning. When she submitted the report to Child Protection Services, her hands shook slightly. A part of her feared she was about to be wrong. Another part feared she was right. Sleep eluded her that night. By early morning, the school was drowned in noise, students running, laughing, shouting across the courtyard. But one thing felt off. Zuri wasn't there. She was never late, 2 days in a row. As the bell rang and class began, Thandeka tried to focus, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty seat. That small, quiet chair had never felt so painfully noticeable. In the middle of her reading lesson, the classroom door opened. Zuri stepped in slowly, her head lowered, one hand gripping her school bag tightly. She moved like someone who was desperately trying not to cry. "You're late, Zuri," Thandeka said gently. "Are you all right?" "Yes, ma'am," Zuri whispered, though she didn't look all right at all. She moved to sit down, but she flinched before her body even touched the chair, hovering for a painful second before forcing herself down with a quiet gasp. A few students glanced at her, exchanged worried glances, but didn't say anything. Thandeka walked slowly toward her. "What happened?" she whispered. Zuri mumbled something unintelligible. Her eyes were red. Her lips seemed swollen. Before Thandeka could ask more, a knock sounded on the door. The principal stepped in, hands folded in front of him. "Miss Thandeka," he said, "may I speak with you?" Her stomach dropped. When she followed him into the hallway, he lowered his voice. "We received a call this morning from Child Protection Services," he said. "They want to speak with you this afternoon." "Good," she replied. "They should." But the principal didn't relax. His expression hardened. "There's more," he continued. "They also said they need to follow up with the family, and that could cause tension. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "Whatever happens, Zuri's safety comes first." He nodded, relieved by her determination. "I'll support you, Thandeka. But be careful. Some parents don't take kindly to interventions." She knew exactly which parent he meant. During break, the class emptied out to the playground. Zuri stayed behind again. She sat at her desk, staring at her hands, the faint tremors in her shoulders betraying how fragile she felt. Zuri, Thandeka said softly, pulling a small stool beside her desk. "Talk to me. I'm not here to hurt you." The girl's lips parted, but she hesitated. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry I left the room yesterday. I got scared." "It's all right," Thandeka reassured. "I'm not upset. I'm just worried." "Did something happen last night?" Zuri's breath hitched. The teacher waited patiently. "My dad." "He was angry," she whispered. "He said I shouldn't talk to teachers about Ohm." "Did he hurt you?" Zuri shook her head quickly. "No. He didn't hit me. He only got loud. But you came to school in pain, sweetheart. You can barely sit." Zuri's face tightened. "My stepmother said." "She said I have to stop making trouble. That I must not cry. That I must behave." Thandeka leaned closer. "Zuri, does your stepmother hurt you?" Silence. Zuri stared at the floor. She said, "If I say anything, she'll..." Her voice cracked. "She'll make me kneel all night. She'll take my food away. She'll tell my dad lies about me." A chill rippled through the teacher's spine. "So it's your stepmother," Thandeka murmured. Zuri squeezed her eyes shut, as if afraid the walls might hear her. "I'm not supposed to say that," she whispered. "She told me to say it was Dad. She said nobody will believe me if I tell the truth. Why does she want you to blame your father?" Because Dad gets angry when he thinks I did something wrong. She wants him to punish me so she doesn't have to. This was darker than Thandeka imagined. A mother figure so manipulative, she used the father's temper to hide her own cruelty. Zuri, she said gently, I need you to know something. None of this is your fault, and you don't deserve any of it. The girl trembled harder. She said, everyone will hate me if I talk. No, Thandeka said firmly. The only one who should be afraid right now is the person hurting you. Zuri looked up, eyes wide. For the first time, there was a flicker of hope. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Later that afternoon, the Child Protection Services officer arrived at the school. A tall woman named Miss Gamazzo introduced herself politely before sitting down with Thandeka in the counseling room. We've reviewed your report, she said, flipping through her notes. These signs are serious, especially the forced blaming. That suggests psychological manipulation. Yes, Thandeka replied. And today I saw another bruise. Zuri's terrified to talk, but she's slipping little details. Is the father abusive? That's unclear, Thandeka said honestly. He's stern, angry, but Zuri seems protective of him. Everything points to the stepmother. The officer nodded. Then we'll conduct a home visit. Possibly as early as tomorrow. Will that put Zuri in more danger? Only if they realize she spoke, the officer answered, which is why we'll approach it as a routine welfare check. Thandeka appreciated the strategy, though, her chest tightened with worry. Please be gentle with her, she whispered. She's so scared. We will, the officer promised. But be prepared. These investigations can escalate quickly. When school ended, something unexpected happened. Manla didn't show up. Instead, it was Kalaya. She stepped out of a sleek black taxi, a sharp contrast to Manla's rusty truck. Tall, impeccably dressed, and wearing gold earrings, she approached with a confident stride that made several teachers glance her way. Zuri froze the moment she saw her. Kalia smiled too brightly. Hello, sweetheart. Ready to go home, Zuri nodded weakly. Thandeka stepped forward. Good afternoon. I didn't know you'd be picking Zuri up today. Kalia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Manla had an errand. I thought I'd help. Her eyes lingered on Thandeka's face in a slow, calculating sweep. A warning. I've heard, Kalia began softly, almost syrupy, that you've been asking Zuri a lot of questions lately. The teacher stiffened. I ask all my students questions, but she said you're very interested in her home life. I care about her well-being. Of course, Kalia replied with a chilling smile. But you don't need to worry. We discipline our child. We keep her in line. Discipline. That word twisted like a blade. Before Thandeka could respond, Kalia reached for Zuri's wrist. Not roughly, not gently, just firmly enough to show ownership. We must go, she said. Dinner won't cook itself. Zuri didn't look back as she followed her stepmother to the taxi. But right before the door closed, she risked one quick glance at her teacher. And in that split second, Thandeka saw it. Fear, begging, a silent plea for rescue. The car door shut. The taxi pulled away. And Miss Thandeka knew without a doubt that the storm was about to break. Hard. That night, while the rest of the city drifted into the calm of evening routines, pots simmering on stoves, televisions humming in living rooms, children finishing homework, there was no calm inside Manla's small, cramped home. The air was thick, not with warmth or safety, but with tension so sour it felt suffocating. Zuri had barely stepped inside when Kalaya's smile vanished, dropping from her face like a mask being peeled away. Inside, she ordered. Zuri obeyed instantly, stepping cautiously as though the floorboards themselves might punish her. The moment the door shut, Kalaya grabbed the girl's arm and spun her around. What did you tell her? She hissed, face inches away. Nothing, Zuri whispered. Kalia's nails dug into her skin. Don't lie to me, I can smell fear on you. I didn't say anything, Zuri insisted, trembling now. Then why, Kalaya sneered, did your precious teacher look at me as if she knows something? Zuri shook her head frantically. Tears blurred her vision. I didn't say anything, Kalaya released her abruptly, pacing the room. The tiny kitchen light flickered above them, casting shadows that made the entire scene feel even more sinister. You listen carefully, she said, turning sharply. If she asks you anything again, you say you are clumsy. Or you say you fell. Or say your father was disciplining you. You never mentioned my name. Do you understand? Zuri swallowed. Yes. No, Kalaya snapped, slamming her hand against the wall. I said, do you understand? The girl's voice cracked. Yes, ma'am. Satisfied, Kalaya stepped closer. Good. Because if you embarrass this family again, her eyes darkened, you won't sit for a week. Zuri's breath hitched. And then just as suddenly as the storm started, Manla burst through the front door. He looked tired eyes, bloodshot shirt, stained with oil from whatever odd job he had found that day. His boots dragged across the floor, and he didn't seem to notice the tension filling the room. "What's going on?" he grunted, dropping heavily into a chair. "Your daughter is being dramatic again," Kalia replied sweetly. Zuri froze. Manla's shoulders tensed. "Dramatic about what she thinks teachers need to know our business," Kalia continued. "But don't worry," I corrected her. Manla glared at Zuri. "Did you talk about home?" Zuri's throat tightened. I didn't mean." "That's not what I asked," he snapped. "Did you?" Kalia watched with satisfaction. "I only told her I had pain," Zuri whispered. Manla's jaw tightened. Pain from what Zuri hesitated too long. Pain from falling. Kalia interjected smoothly. She tripped over her own feet as usual. Zuri nodded quickly, afraid to contradict her. Manla sighed heavily. "Zuri, you have to stop bringing attention to this family. We already have enough trouble." "I'm sorry," Zuri whispered, head lowered. Kalia shot one last threatening glance at the girl before turning to cook dinner, leaving Zuri standing alone in the living room, shaking but silent. Meanwhile, across town, Miss Thandika sat at her desk, staring at the clock. She hadn't touched her dinner. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying every detail of the afternoon: Kalia's cold smile, her subtle threats, Zuri's terrified glance. Her instinct screamed that Kalia was hiding something far worse than what she had glimpsed. An anxious knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Sibusiso. "I was nearby," he said. "Thought I'd check on you." She motioned for him to sit, though she barely had the strength to pretend she was okay. "You're worried about Zuri," he said softly. "I'm terrified," she replied. "She's so fragile, and that woman, she knows something." "Did the officer say when the home visit will happen tomorrow morning?" Thandeka answered. "They'll make it seem like a routine welfare check." "That's good news." "It is," she said, but then her voice lowered. "Unless Kalia finds out before they get there." Sibusiso frowned. "Do you think she suspects you reported it?" "She definitely suspects something. And if she confronts Zuri tonight?" Thandeka swallowed hard. "I can't stop thinking about what might be happening right now." But she had no idea how close to the truth she was. Inside, Manla's home dinner was silent except for the occasional clinking of cutlery. Zuri sat gingerly on her chair, wincing every time she shifted. Manla didn't seem to notice. Kalia noticed everything. After dinner, Kalia ordered her to clean the dishes. Zuri moved slowly, her body aching from pain no child should endure. She washed a plate, then another, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped one. The third plate slipped. It didn't break, but it clattered loudly in the sink. That was enough. Kalia stormed into the kitchen. "What did I tell you about being careful?" "I'm sorry," Zuri stammered. "You're always sorry. Sorry doesn't wash dishes." She grabbed Zuri's arm again, yanking her aside. "You stupid, useless child!" Manla suddenly stood in the doorway. For a moment, Kalia froze. Then she switched her tone instantly. "I'm only trying to teach her responsibility," she said sweetly. Manla rubbed his forehead. He looked exhausted, not cruel, not vicious, just drained, defeated, drowning in his own failures. "Zuri," he said, voice softer now, "just finish quickly and go to bed." The girl nodded, relieved that he hadn't seen Kalia's true face. But when Manla left the room, Kalia leaned down and whispered in her ear, each word venomous. "You're the reason he's angry all the time. If you tell that teacher anything tomorrow, I'll make sure he blames you for everything." Zuri felt tears prickling behind her eyes. "And you know what happens," Kalia continued, "when he believes you're the problem." Zuri's entire body trembled. Kalia smiled. "Now wash." Zuri didn't sleep much that night. She lay curled on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the house and the occasional mutter from her father's room. Her back burned. Her legs ached from yesterday's punishment. Her stomach growled she hadn't been allowed to finish her dinner. But the real pain was in her chest. Tomorrow adults would come asking questions. And she didn't know what to say. If she told the truth, Kalia would destroy her. If she lied, the pain would never end. She curled into a ball, tears soaking her pillow. She prayed softly, silently, that somehow someone would save her. Even if she couldn't save herself. The next morning, the atmosphere in the school changed. A quiet buzz of activity moved through the hallways as the Child Protection Services officer arrived earlier than expected. Her presence didn't draw attention. She blended in with the morning crowd, carrying a clipboard to keep up appearances. Thandika waited at the entrance, heart pounding. "Ready?" the officer asked. "Yes," she replied. "But I fear the family isn't." Before they could leave, the sound of a small, trembling voice behind them made them turn. Miss T. It was Zuri. She stood just outside the gate alone. No pickup truck, no stepmother, no father. Just her clutching her bag, looking as if she had been walking for hours. Zuri Thandeka asked, kneeling quickly, "Where's your dad? Where's your stepmother?" The child's lips quivered. I ran," she whispered. "I couldn't stay. Something bad was going to happen." A tear fell down her cheek, and then another. "I'm scared," she whispered. Miss Thandeka pulled her into her arms. "I know, sweetheart," she murmured. "You're safe now. I promise, you're safe." But even as she held her, she felt the faint tremor in Zuri's body, the tremor of a child who had fled not just punishment, but survival. And whatever happened next would change everything. When Zuri collapsed into Miss Thandeka's arms that morning, the Child Protection Services officer, Miss Gomotso, immediately stepped forward. Her professional demeanor did not hide the shock in her eyes. It was rare for a child to flee their home voluntarily before an investigation had even begun. "Zuri," she said, gently kneeling beside the girl, "did something happen this morning?" Zuri didn't answer. She buried her face deeper into Miss Thandeka's shoulder, small hands clutching at the fabric of the teacher's blouse, as if clinging to the only safe anchor she had left. "Let's take her inside," Thandeka said softly. "She's freezing." When the three of them walked into the empty counseling room, Zuri stayed glued to Thandeka's side. Her usually neat braids were messy and her shoes were muddy. It was clear she had walked quite a distance. The officer sat down, flipping open her notebook, but speaking with the softest voice she could manage. "Zuri, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. You're very brave for coming here. But we need to understand what happened so we can keep you safe." Zuri's breathing was fast, too fast. Her chest rose and fell, as if she was balancing between answering and shutting down completely. Finally, she whispered, "I woke up early because I heard them talking." "Your dad and stepmother?" Thandeka asked. Zuri nodded. "What were they talking about?" The child swallowed hard. "About the home visit." Thandeka stiffened. They knew. Zuri nodded again, tears swelling. "Kalia said, you reported us. She said you want to break our family. She said if I say anything wrong to the people coming, she'll make me." She broke off, hands trembling violently. Miss Kagematsu leaned forward. "She'll make you what?" Zuri shook her head. "I can't say. I can't." The officer exchanged a grave look with Thandeka. Whatever Kalia threatened was too terrifying for the girl to repeat. "Did you run away because you were scared of her punishment?" the officer asked carefully. Zuri's bottom lip quivered. "She said she would tell Dad that I lied about something important. She said he would be so angry he wouldn't look at me again. She said he might even send me away." Her voice shrank to a whisper. "I don't want him to hate me." That broke something in Thandeka's chest. She reached out and gently touched Zuri's cheek. "Your father should never put you in a place where you have to fear losing his love. That is not your fault." But Zuri wiped at her face with small trembling hands. "He gets angry when I'm difficult. She said I'm the reason he's stressed. She said I make his life harder." "That's not true," Thandeka said firmly. "None of this is your fault." Before more questions could be asked, the school security guard appeared at the door looking unusually pale. "Miss Thandeka," he said quietly, "there's someone asking for you at the gate." Her stomach tightened. The guard hesitated. "It's Mr. Mandla." Zuri flinched so hard she nearly fell off the chair. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "It's all right," Thandeka said, quickly putting an arm around her. "No one will take you. I promise." The officer stood. "Take me to him." Thandeka followed. Zuri stayed in the room with the door cracked open, watching through the narrow gap with terrified eyes. Outside the school gate, Mandla stood pacing, jaw, clenched hands, shaking. But he wasn't the same explosive, aggressive man Thandeka had faced before. He looked broken. "Where's my daughter?" he demanded the second he saw them. His voice wasn't angry, it was desperate. "She left the house before sunrise." "Did she come here?" "She's safe," the officer replied calmly. "But before we bring her out, we need to talk about what's been reported." Mandla rubbed his face, looking tormented. "This is about those bruises, isn't it?" "Yes," the officer said. "And her fear of going home." He flinched. "I never laid a hand on that child. Never. I raised her since she was 3. I might shout, I might be hard sometimes, but I would never, never touch her that way." "And your wife?" the officer asked carefully. Mandla's body went rigid. For a moment he said nothing. Then very quietly, "My wife said Zuri's been lying. She said the teacher is filling her head with nonsense. She said the bruises are because Zuri is clumsy and dramatic. And do you believe that Thandeka pressed? Manla hesitated. Too long. The officer stepped forward. How does your daughter act when your wife is around? Manla's shoulders sank. She gets quiet, he admitted. Stiff. She won't look up. He covered his face with his hands. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe your daughter, Thandeka said firmly. She is terrified. Before Manla could respond, a voice cracked through the quiet daddy. They turned. Zuri stood at the doorway, eyes wide and glassy. She looked torn between relief and terror. Manla rushed to her but stopped a step away when she flinched. His face twisted in pain. Baby, I'm not going to hurt you, he whispered. I'm sorry, she said quickly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't mean to run. I didn't mean to make trouble. I didn't mean to. No, he said, voice cracking. You're not in trouble. I just want you home. Zuri shook her head violently. I don't want to go back. Please don't make me go. Manla froze. Each word from her fell like stones at his feet. Zuri, he whispered, voice trembling. Please tell me the truth. Are you scared of me? The girl shook her head. Are you scared of Kalia? Zuri broke. A sob tore from her lips as she stumbled backward toward Thandeka. That was the answer. Manla staggered as though he had been punched. His breath came out in a shudder. My God, he whispered. What has she been doing to you? Zuri covered her face, crying harder. The officer stepped between them gently. Mr. Manla, until we complete our investigation, Zuri cannot go home today. She needs immediate safety. No, Manla said quickly. Take her wherever you need to. Just, please, don't send her back to my house. Thandeka watched him closely. This wasn't a man trying to dodge responsibility. This was a man who had just realized he had failed his daughter in the worst way. Inside the counseling room, Zuri clung to her teacher as the officer made calls for emergency placement. Manla sat hunched in a corner chair, staring at nothing, guilt eating him alive. I didn't know, he whispered to no one in particular. I swear I didn't know. Zuri whispered through her tears. She told me to blame you so no one would suspect her. The officer wrote that down with grim understanding. You yelled, Zuri continued. You got angry, so she said you'd punish me more if you thought I was bad. Manla's hands shook. I didn't hit you. I would never. You shouted, Zuri whispered, and it scared me. Manla's face crumpled. Thandeka placed a hand on his shoulder. She doesn't need a perfect father. She needs a present one. Those words shattered him finally. He bowed his head, sobbing quietly, not for his pride, but for the years of fear he had accidentally allowed. When everything was arranged, the officer stood. We'll escort Zuri to a temporary safe placement. Mr. Manla, you'll be contacted for interviews. Please, he whispered, looking at Zuri, just tell me one thing. Do you still want me? Zuri hesitated. Then she stepped forward and hugged him carefully because even hugging hurt. I always wanted you. Just you, she whispered. Manla held her with trembling arms. That moment, fragile, painful healing, told Thandeka that this story was far from over. But for the first time, Zuri wasn't facing the darkness alone. The temporary shelter wasn't far from the school, but to Zuri, it felt like another world entirely. Wide windows filled the rooms with natural light. The walls were painted in warm colors, and soft couches lined the living area where a few other children sat quietly reading or drawing. Everything felt too calm, too safe, almost unreal for a girl whose life had been shaped by fear, silence, and constant vigilance. When she stepped inside for the first time, she clung to Miss Thandeka's hand as if the floor beneath her might collapse. The child protection officer, Miss Gamazzo, spoke to the staff, filling out forms and explaining the case. You'll be staying here for a few days, sweetheart, miss, Thandeka whispered, kneeling level with her. Just until everything is sorted out. Zuri looked up with wide, worried eyes. Will Daddy be mad I'm staying here? No, Thandeka said firmly. He wants you safe. He agreed with this. What about Kalia? Zuri asked in a trembling voice. You won't see her, the teacher assured gently. Not until everything is investigated properly, and even then, only if it's absolutely safe. Zuri let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her shoulders sagged from the weight of days, months, years of fear beginning to loosen just a little. She won't find me here, right? The girl whispered. No, sweetheart, Thandeka said softly. Not here. Back at the school, news of Zuri's sudden absence spread quickly. Children weren't subtle. Whispers filled the hallways. Some asked directly, others speculated in hushed tones. Did she run away? I think her dad is in trouble. I saw bruises on her back. Maybe she's sick. By lunchtime, half the school had their own theories. But one moment more than any rumor pushed the tension even higher. During a group art session in the afternoon, one student, Ayanda, tried to recreate a drawing she remembered Zuri working on earlier in the week. As she bent to pick up a dropped marker, something fluttered out from Zuri's desk. A piece of paper. She picked it up, curious. It was a rough sketch. A child, small, crying, kneeling on the floor. Behind her loomed a tall woman with sharp eyes and raised hand. The details were jagged, but the terror in the child's expression was unmistakable. Ayanda froze. She knew exactly who the kneeling child was meant to be. Before she could show anyone, Miss Thandika approached from behind, speaking softly but firmly. Ayanda? May I see that? Ayanda handed it over silently. Her teacher took a long, slow breath, her chest tightening. She already suspected what Zuri had been suffering, but seeing the pain drawn in pencil made it feel unbearably real. Thank you, she whispered. I'll keep this safe. Ayanda nodded quietly. She looked shaken. Miss T? Can we do something? Zuri's my friend. For a moment, Thandika struggled to keep her composure. You have helped, she said softly, more than you know. But she didn't show the drawing to the class. Some truths were too sharp for 10-year-old hearts to carry. That evening after school hours, the rain began to fall slow at first, then harder, pounding against the roof, as though echoing the turmoil, twisting through multiple households. In Manla's home, the atmosphere was suffocating. The living room felt colder without Zuri's quiet presence. Manla sat on the couch, head in his hands, surrounded by silence so thick it almost buzzed. Kalia paced near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, irritation etched deep into her face. This is ridiculous, she snapped. They took her just like that. That's what happens when you hurt a child, Manla muttered without lifting his head. Kalia scoffed. Hurt her? I didn't hurt her. She bruises like fruit. She lies, Manla. You know she's always been dramatic. He looked up sharply. I saw the fear in her eyes today. Fear of you, Kalia. That's nonsense, she insisted. She knows I discipline her only when necessary. She knows I always. Stop lying, Manla growled. That was new. Kalia froze. Don't you dare, she began. Don't you dare, he echoed, standing up slowly. Don't you dare act like you haven't been cruel to her. Don't you dare pretend those bruises happened by themselves. Kalia's eyes narrowed. You think you know everything. You're barely home. That's because I work, he snapped. Someone in this house has to. Oh, please, she spat. You work odd jobs. You barely bring enough for electricity and bread. Manla's hands clenched. This isn't about money. No, she shot back, stepping closer, face cold. It's about your daughter turning you against me. She wants attention, Manla. She wants you all to herself. He stared at her in disbelief. She's 10, Kalia. Exactly, she hissed. Young enough to manipulate you. He turned away, disgusted. But Kalia wasn't done. You're really going to believe a child over your wife? Manla spun toward her. Yes, he said fiercely. If that child is crying for help. Kalia's expression twisted into something dark and venomous. Fine, she said with icy calm. Believe her. Let her ruin our life. But I swear this isn't over. The threat hung thick in the air. And Manla suddenly feared he had underestimated his wife for far too long. Meanwhile, in the shelter, Zuri sat on a soft bed with a blanket wrapped around her. There were other children in the room, but she remained quiet, watching them from a safe distance. A staff member brought her warm food and a cup of tea, but she only nibbled at the bread. When Thandika visited later that evening, dripping wet from the rain, Zuri's face brightened just barely. You came, she whispered. Of course I came, Thandika said, sitting beside her. Is Daddy angry? Zuri asked softly. No, Thandika assured her. He wants you safe, and he wants to fix things. Zuri hesitated for a moment before crawling closer to her teacher, leaning her small head gently against her shoulder. Miss T, she whispered, is it bad to love someone who scares you? Thandika felt her throat tighten. No, sweetheart. That just means your heart is big. But people who love you should keep you safe, not make you afraid. Zuri nodded slowly. Then she reached into her pillowcase and pulled out something crumpled, a small, torn photograph. My mom, she said quietly. I don't remember her much. The woman in the photograph was young, smiling, holding a toddler Zuri on her lap. They both looked happy, free. When she died, Zuri whispered, everything changed. Thandika hugged her gently. I know. But things can change again. This time for the better. A tear slid down Zuri's cheek. Do you think Dad will want me back? Yes, Thandika said firmly. He wants to try, really try. And Kalia, the teacher, hesitated. Finally, she said the truth. You won't have to live with her anymore. Not if the investigation proves what we believe. Zuri let out a shaky breath. For the first time, she didn't look terrified, just tired, exhausted from surviving. Back at school the next morning, the desks felt emptier without her. Children kept glancing at her chair, and Ayanda asked 3 times if she could draw a welcome back card, just in case Zuri returned soon. But before the day truly began, something happened that chilled the entire administrative wing. Kalia showed up. She stormed through the entrance face tight with rage, ignoring the receptionist's attempts to stop her. "Where is she?" Kalia shouted. "Where is that teacher filling my stepdaughter's head with lies?" Teachers paused mid-conversation. Students stopped in the hallways. Eyes widened. Voices hushed. And in her classroom, hearing the commotion from down the hall, Miss Thandika felt the storm arrive. Kalia wasn't here for conversation. She was here to fight. And everyone knew it. The scream echoed down the hallway so sharply that even the students in the far classrooms froze. It was the type of voice that wasn't used to being questioned, the type that sliced through doors, walls, and nerves like a blade. "Where is she? Where is that teacher?" Miss Thandeka's chalk snapped in her hand. She didn't need anyone to tell her who it was. Kalia. The classroom went silent. 26 children stared at their teacher with wide eyes. Some whispered, some held their breath. Even the boldest ones shrank into their seats. Before she could tell them to stay calm, the classroom door burst open, so violently it hit the wall with a bang. And there she stood, Kalia drenched in rain, hair disheveled, eyes blazing. Her anger filled the room like smoke. "You," she spat, locking her gaze on Thandeka. "You think you can break my family? You think you can steal my husband's daughter?" Miss Thandeka stepped protectively in front of the class. "Kalia, this is not the place." "Oh, this is exactly the place," Kalia snarled, taking a step forward. "This is where you've been poisoning Zuri's mind against her own home. She came to me, scared," Thandeka replied evenly. "Crying, bruised. You can't blame me for her pain. I disciplined her," Kalia snapped. "Parents discipline children. That is not abuse. Discipline doesn't leave purple marks up and down a child's back." The students gasped softly. Some covered their mouths. Kalia laughed a sharp, humorless sound. "You think you know everything, but you know nothing about my family." "Nothing," Thandeka raised an eyebrow. "I know enough to report it." That triggered something in Kalia. She lunged forward so fast that chairs scraped and children screamed. But before she could reach the teacher, a pair of strong arms wrapped around her. Mr. Sibusiso, who had sprinted from his classroom the moment he heard the commotion. "Enough," he shouted, holding her back. "This is a school, not a battleground." "Let go of me," she shrieked, thrashing violently. "I want to see the woman destroying my life." The principal rushed in next, followed by 2 security guards. Within seconds, the hallway outside the classroom turned into chaos. Teachers peered from their doors. Children cried. The air buzzed with fear. "Miss!" "Kalia," the principal said sternly, "you are trespassing and disrupting the learning environment. You need to leave immediately." "No," she shouted. "Not until she explains what she did to my stepdaughter." She saved her a small voice, said. Everyone fell silent, and they turned. Outside the classroom window stood Manla, rain dripping from his jacket, breath misting in the cold air, eyes bloodshot as though he hadn't slept. He stepped forward slowly, his voice trembling not with anger, but with shame. "She saved our daughter," he said again. "Because I didn't." Kalia froze. The fight drained from her body in an instant. "Manla," she breathed, "you don't mean that." "You, I do." He stepped inside the room facing her fully. "I should have protected Zuri. Instead, I let you convince me she was the problem." "She lied," Kalia insisted, panic creeping into her voice. "She didn't lie," Manla said, shaking his head. "She was terrified of you, of what you'd do to her." Kalia's eyes darted between him and Thandeka, desperation rising. "You're believing a child over your wife." "I'm believing the bruises," he replied, and the fear in her eyes every time you walked past. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the principal cleared his throat. "Miss Kalia, you need to leave the premises while this investigation continues. If you refuse, we will call law enforcement." Kalia's face twisted with fury and panic. "This is ridiculous. You can't take her word over mine. She's a child. Children lie. Children exaggerate. Children don't run away at dawn barefoot through the rain," Manla snapped. "Children don't flinch like she does." Something dark flickered in Kalia's eyes. Not guilt, not sorrow, fear. "Where is she?" she whispered. "What did they do with her?" Manla shook his head. "She's safe, and she'll stay safe." The words hit Kalia like a blow. Her lips trembled, not with sadness but with rage. You think you can take her from me, she hissed. You think this is over. It is, Manla said firmly. For your sake, leave now. The guards stepped forward. Kalia glanced at them, then at the crowd gathering outside the classroom, then finally at Thandeka. And her voice lowered to a venomous whisper. You will regret this. The guards escorted her out. The entire school seemed to exhale in relief. In the aftermath, the principal dismissed the students for an early recess so they could recover from the shock. Teachers guided trembling children to the playground or to quiet rooms to calm down. Inside the classroom, Thandeka leaned against her desk, breathing heavily. Sibusiso patted her back. You all right, she nodded. I'm more worried about Zuri. If Kalia came all the way here? She's becoming dangerous, he said. She always was, Thandeka replied. That afternoon, Thandeka visited the shelter again, shaken but determined. Zuri was sitting on the floor with coloring pencils, drawing quietly. When she saw her teacher, she ran to her. You came back, she whispered. Of course, Thandeka said, hugging her tightly. I want to check on you. Zuri looked up. Did she come to school? Thandeka paused. She didn't want to frighten the girl, but she had to be truthful. Yes, she said gently, but she won't reach you. The police have been notified. Zuri's eyes widened slightly. Is Daddy okay? He's worried about you, she said softly, and he's angry at himself, but he stood up for you today. Zuri blinked rapidly, holding in tears. He did. For the first time, the child gave a small, fragile smile. Then she leaned close. Miss T, can I tell you something? Anything. My stepmother, Zuri whispered. She didn't just hit me. She made me kneel on salt. She made me hold pots of water above my head. She made me say bad things about Dad so he would punish me. Thandeka felt her heart crack. She said, if I ever told the truth, she would make me sleep outside, or lock me in the kitchen cupboard, or, Zuri hesitated, voice trembling, or make Dad hate me forever. Thandeka gathered her gently into her arms. You don't have to keep any of those secrets anymore, she whispered. You're safe. And you are so incredibly brave. Zuri clung to her, tightly burying her face in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to cry freely. Later that evening, Manla visited the shelter for a scheduled supervised meeting. When he entered the room and saw Zuri sitting there small, fragile, but alive, his breath caught. Baby, he whispered. Zuri stood slowly, hesitant. I'm sorry, Manla said, voice breaking. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I should have known. I should have protected you. Tears pooled in Zuri's eyes. Dad, I didn't want you to be mad. I could never hate you, he whispered, stepping forward. Never. She rushed into his arms. The reunion wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, raw, trembling, healing. But while father and daughter clung to each other, Kalia sat alone somewhere in the city, seething, plotting, and waiting. This battle wasn't over. Not yet. The following days unfolded with a surreal mix of hope, fear, and fragile new beginnings. Yet underneath it all, a quiet storm continued brewing. Zuri stayed at the shelter, attended school under supervision, and gradually began opening up to the counselors. Her small world, once filled with shadows and whispered threats, was starting just barely to brighten. But trauma wasn't something that vanished overnight. On her third day at the shelter, Zuri woke up from a nightmare so vivid she screamed herself awake, trembling and gasping. The staff rushed to calm her. She clutched her blanket and sobbed. She's coming, she said she would find me. They held her gently until the trembling eased. Later that morning, she walked into school with cautious steps, as if expecting danger around every corner. When she entered the classroom, the students fell silent. Some glanced away awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Others stared openly at her bruises, which had faded to dull yellow patches. Ayanda was the first to speak. She stood and approached Zuri with a hand-drawn card full of small flowers and smiling stick figures. You can sit with me, she said shyly. I saved your seat. Zuri blinked fast, her eyes filling with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. Thank you, she whispered. Miss? Thandeka, watching from the doorway, felt her heart tighten. Children could be cruel, but they could also be the purest sources of kindness. Still, the teacher couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. A dread that had been simmering inside her since the confrontation with Kalia. That afternoon, Manla arrived for another supervised visit at the shelter. He looked cleaner, calmer, almost like a man trying to rebuild himself from the ashes of his guilt. Zuri approached him tentatively, as if afraid he might disappear into thin air. Manla knelt, holding out his arms. She stepped into them. He held her longer than before, breathing her in, as though trying to memorize the moment. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. For what she asked, her voice small. For surviving, he said. For telling the truth. For trusting someone. Even when it scared you. Zuri rested her head against his chest. Do you still want me? His grip tightened. Zuri, I always want you. Nothing changes that. But Kalia said, no, he interrupted softly. You don't have to repeat her words. Her lies stay with her, not with you. Zuri nodded, comforted. But a question gnawed at her. What will happen when I go home? Manla's breathing shifted. Sweetheart, you won't go home. Not yet. And not to the same home. He took her hands gently. I'm going to fix everything, I promise you. For the first time, Zuri felt a flicker of safety in her father's presence. But promises like his heavy, desperate, sincere would soon be tested. Meanwhile, Kalia's world was quickly collapsing. She sat in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of the life she believed she controlled. The authorities had already visited twice, neighbors whispered. Her friends avoided her calls. Even her own relatives refused to take her side. But Kalia wasn't remorseful. She was furious. And fear mixed with fury created a dangerous kind of desperation. She paced the room like a trapped animal clutching her phone. He betrayed me, she muttered. After everything I've done for this house, for him, for the phone rang, suddenly startling her. She grabbed it. Manla, the voice on the other end, was cold. It belonged to his older sister Naledi. You're done, Kalia, Naledi said sharply. We know everything. The investigation will expose you. You need to leave. Leave, Kalia hissed. This is my house. I built this home. I raised you, terrorized that child, Naledi snapped. And you manipulated my brother when he was vulnerable. Kalia's jaw clenched. You people never liked me. You all just want to tear us apart. We want Zuri safe, Naledi said. Something you never provided. With that, she hung up. Kalia stared at the silent phone, her anger morphing into something darker, a resolve born from losing control. No one, she whispered, takes what's mine. The next morning at school, something unexpected happened. During PE class, when students were changing into their athletic clothes, a girl accidentally bumped into Zuri. As Zuri turned, her shirt lifted slightly, and one of the older girls gasped. Another bruise. A fresh one. Small but unmistakable. Zuri Ayanda cried. That's new. Zuri froze, panic flooding her eyes. No, it's old, it just looks new. But the other girls were already calling Miss Thandeka. The teacher rushed in, heart-dropping, when she saw the mark. Zuri, she whispered, kneeling. Who did this? The child looked ready to faint. I don't know. But her breathing quickened. She swayed, and then she collapsed. Minutes later, alarms rang through the school. Zuri was carried to the nurse's office, pale and shaking. Her breathing was shallow, her tiny body trembling like a leaf in a storm. Miss Thandeka sat beside her, brushing back her hair. Sweetheart, breathe. I'm here. Zuri clutched her teacher's sleeve with a weak hand. She found me, she whispered. Thandeka's blood ran cold. Who but Zuri had already slipped into near unconsciousness. Within an hour, Child Protection Services arrived again, this time with urgency. This changes everything, Miss Gamazzo said. Someone reached her or frightened her between yesterday and today. We need to identify who. Kalia, Thandeka said immediately. It has to be her. But how, the officer asked. The shelter is secure. Thandeka didn't know. But Zuri's fear wasn't imaginary. Something had happened. Something that left a fresh mark. Something that made a 10-year-old collapse from terror. While the school buzzed with tension, Manla received a call that shattered him. Mr. Manla, the officer said sternly, we need you at the school immediately. It's about Zuri. He didn't even hang up properly. He sprinted out the door, racing down streets like a man possessed. When he arrived and saw his daughter lying weak and trembling in the nurse's office, he staggered. What happened to her, he choked. Thandeka shook her head. We don't know yet, but she has a new bruise. Manla's face drained of color. He grabbed a chair, sitting shakily beside Zuri. I promised to keep you safe, he whispered. I promised. Zuri stirred, opening her eyes halfway. Daddy, she said. She'd find me, she murmured. Manla leaned closer. Who did you see? Zuri looked right at him. Slowly, painfully, she whispered a name. Kalia. Thandeka inhaled sharply. Manla's gaze hardened, not with fear, but with fury. I'm ending this, he snarled. I'm ending it today. But as he stood, the school intercom crackled to life. Attention staff, please lock your classrooms. We have a report of an unauthorized visitor attempting to enter the premises. Thandika froze. Manla froze. The officer froze. The intercom continued, voice trembling. She was last seen near the back fence. Zuri's eyes widened with terror. She's here, the girl whispered. She's looking for me. And in that moment, everyone understood Kalia was not done. Not even close. The announcement crackled through the school speakers like a lightning bolt tearing through calm skies. Every adult in earshot felt their pulse spike at the same moment. Teachers hurried to lock doors. Children were gathered and kept away from windows. Security scrambled toward the back fence. But inside, the nurse's office time seemed to slow. Zuri's breathing turned shallow. Her fingers tightened around the blanket as if she could hide inside it. She's here, the girl whispered again, voice cracking, eyes darting wildly around the room. Miss T, Daddy, she said she'd come. She said she always finds me. Manla's fists clenched so hard, his knuckles turned white. Miss Thandeka exchanged a fearful look with the child protection officer, Miss Kagomatsu. This shouldn't be possible, the officer muttered. The shelter is secure. How did she even get close to the school she must have been watching? Thandeka whispered. Waiting for an opportunity. Zuri trembled violently. She said she'd take me somewhere no one could find me. Manla dropped to his knees beside her. No one is taking you, Zuri. Not now. Not ever again. But even as he spoke, fear pulsed beneath every word, because Kalia was unraveling, a cornered animal fighting for control she'd already lost. Miss Kagomatsu stepped forward. We need to move her. This room isn't secure enough, where Thandeka asked. To the administrative building. It's the safest room on campus, locked doors, reinforced windows. Then she lowered her voice, and security is already surrounding it. Manla scooped Zuri gently into his arms. She flinched but didn't protest. She was too weak to walk, too frightened to even stand. As they rushed out, Zuri's eyes flicked to the windows along the hallway. Every shadow made her jump. Every echo made her cling harder to her father. Students peered from classroom windows as the group hurried past. None asked questions, not after the announcement. They simply watched, wide-eyed, sensing danger, but not understanding the darkness trailing behind it. When they reached the administrative building, the principal met them at the door, face pale. She tried to get through the back fence, he whispered. Security spotted her. She ran, disappeared around the east side. Is the police on their way? Thandeka demanded. Yes, but he hesitated, voice cracking. We don't know where she is now. Zuri whimpered and buried her face in Manla's chest. Get her inside, the principal urged. The administrative office was a rectangular room with tall metal cabinets lining the walls. A large desk sat in the center, flanked by a row of chairs. The heavy windows rattled slightly with the wind. Manla carried Zuri to a soft chair and sat with her in his lap, holding her as if afraid she might disappear again. Thandeka sat on Zuri's other side, shielding her with her presence. The officer stood near the door, listening for footsteps. Minutes passed. Each one stretched painfully. The tension was so thick it felt like the oxygen itself was thinning. Finally, a knock sounded sharp, abrupt. Manla jolted. Zuri jerked violently, her breath catching. The officer signaled for silence. Another knock, all too familiar, all too intense. Mr. Principal, said the security guard's muffled voice, we need you outside. Everyone exhaled in relief. But the principal didn't move. The guard spoke again. Sir, it's urgent. You need to come now. Something in the tone felt wrong. Too calm, too controlled. Thandeka's heart started pounding again. The officer motioned the principal back. Ask a question. He hesitated. Then called out, which guard are you? Name. Silence. Then open the door. It was not the guard's voice. It was hers. Kalia. Zuri began sobbing uncontrollably. Manla held her tighter, whispering, don't look, don't listen. You're safe. You're safe. But the doorknob rattled violently, jerking back and forth. Give me my daughter, Kalia screamed from the other side. She belongs with me. You don't understand anything. The door shook as she threw her weight against it. The metal hinges groaned. The officer braced herself against it, pushing back. Kalia, stop, Manla roared. Her furious voice lashed back. You let them take her. You let them steal her from me. She needs discipline. She needs order. You almost killed her. He shouted. Lies, she shrieked. The door shook harder. Security shouted outside, struggling to restrain her. Then, as if struck by lightning, Kalia's voice dropped to a chilling softness. Zuri, baby, come out. Mommy's here. The girl covered her ears, sobbing harder. She's not my mom. She's not my mom. Zuri, the woman crooned from the other side, don't listen to them. They're lying to you. They want to send you away. They want to put you in a place far from Daddy. But mommy can fix everything. Just come out. No, Zuri screamed. No, Thandeka's eyes burned with fury. She's manipulating her. Through the door, the banging returned fiercer than before. Then all at once it stopped. Silence. A silence so complete it felt wrong. Thandeka peered through the small security glass window on the door. Kalia was gone. Where is she? The officer whispered. But no one knew. Outside, heavy footsteps echoed rapidly. Security guards running, shouting into radios, searching the grounds. She jumped the fence again, one cried. She's circling the school. Watch the windows, another shouted. The chaos outside bled into the office. Every sound amplified Zuri's fear. She said she'd take me, Zuri whispered, choking on her own breath. She said she'd take me away. She won't, Manla said fiercely. I swear to you, she won't. But he kept glancing at the windows, at the doors, at every shadow. Minutes passed. Then a crash, glass shattering. Everyone whipped their heads toward the back window. Kalia was outside, face bloodied from climbing fences, hair, wild eyes glowing with madness. She slammed her palms on the glass, leaving smeared streaks. You can't hide her forever, she screamed. She's mine. She raised something, a large stone, and hurled it at the window. Cracks spread across the glass like spider webs. But before she could throw again, strong arms yanked her backward. Police. They tackled her to the ground, wrestling the stone from her hands. She kicked, screamed, fought like someone possessed. Let me go. She's lying. They're poisoning her against me. 3 officers held her down. Her screams turned shrill, hollow, desperate. Zuri, I'm your mother. You're not, Manla roared through the cracked window. You lost that right. The day you hurt her. Kalia's shriek tore through the yard, raw and furious. But it was over. They pinned her, handcuffed her, dragged her away. Her voice faded, still screaming, still denying, still unraveling. And then the yard fell silent. Inside the office, Zuri collapsed against her father, sobbing in relief and terror all at once. It's over, baby, Manla whispered. It's over. Thandeka placed a gentle hand on Zuri's back, tears burning behind her own eyes. You're safe, completely safe now. But even as she said it, she knew this was only the beginning of the long road ahead, because trauma didn't vanish when danger was gone. It only began healing once safety was certain, and for the first time since her mother died, Zuri finally had a chance at that safety. But the emotional reckoning for Manla, for Zuri, for the entire truth, was only just beginning. The day Kalia was dragged off the school grounds was the day Zuri finally slept without fear of a door bursting open or a hand gripping her arm in the darkness. But safety, as the counselors reminded everyone, was only the first step. Healing required something far deeper and far slower. That evening, in the quiet of the shelter's private counseling room, Zuri sat curled on the couch with a soft blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her breathing had steadied, but her eyes, still swollen from tears, held the hollow exhaustion of a child who had survived far too much. Across from her sat Miss Komotso, the child protection officer. On her right sat Miss Thandeka. And beside her, holding her hand carefully, sat Mandla. The father had not left her side since the attack. The room was warm, lit gently by a floor lamp. Outside, the hum of the city at dusk created a distant, muffled backdrop, cars rolling by, people talking, tires moving through wet pavement. But inside, everything was slow, quiet, safe. Zuri, the officer, began softly. We want to understand everything so we can help you. You can tell us what happened in your own time. The girl nodded, though. Her grip on Manla's hand tightened. Her father swallowed hard, looking at her as though afraid he might break her with the slightest movement. He had never looked more remorseful or more determined than he did now. Zuri took a shaky breath. It started after Mommy died. Manla's breath caught. You were sad, she whispered. Always sad. You cried at night. You didn't talk to me. And then she came. You mean Kalia, the officer asked gently? Zuri nodded. She was nice at first. She brought me new hair ribbons. She made me pancakes. She called me sweetheart. I thought she wanted to be my mom. Her voice cracked. But after a few months, she changed. How sweetheart? Thandeka asked. Zuri's face tightened. She said I was messy. She said I was annoying. She said I reminded Daddy of Mommy too much. She said I made him sad. A tear slid down Manla's cheek. He didn't wipe it. She started punishing me, Zuri whispered. At first it was just small things, making me stand in the corner, making me skip dessert. And then the officer prompted gently. Zuri hesitated. Her grip on the blanket tightened. She made me kneel on the salt, she whispered. Thandeka felt her heart lurch painfully. She made me kneel for hours, Zuri continued. My knees burned. They bled. She said it was my fault because I dropped a cup. Manla covered his mouth, quietly sobbing. She told me not to tell you, Daddy, Zuri whispered, voice shaking. She said you'd be disappointed in me. She said you'd send me away because you wanted a quiet home. I never wanted that, Manla choked out. Never. Zuri, I'm so sorry. But Zuri continued, tears falling freely now. When you were tired or angry, she would tell you lies. She'd say I said bad things. Or that I broke something on purpose. Or that I stole food. Manla shook his head in disbelief. She manipulated me. She made me say you did things, Zuri whispered. She said if I didn't blame you, she would make Daddy hurt more. She said you were already sad. She said I caused it. What things did she make you say I did? Manla asked, trembling. Zuri looked down. She made me say you hit me. The silence in the room became unbearable. Manla's face crumpled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was forcing you. I know, Zuri said softly. I didn't want to say it, but she said if I told the truth, she would. She stopped. What did she do, Zuri? The officer asked quietly. The girl lowered her voice to barely their whisper. She locked me in the cupboard. A horrified gasp escaped Thandeka. For how long, the officer asked, though her voice trembled. Sometimes all night, sometimes half the day. I didn't know. Did she feed you while you were in there? Asked Miss Kagomotso. No, Zuri whispered. And every time someone at school noticed, every time Miss T asked you questions, did she hurt you more? Zuri nodded. And the bruise from yesterday? Thandeka asked quietly. How did that happen? Zuri curled into herself. When she heard you were coming to check the house, she pushed me. She hit me with a spoon. She told me I deserved worse for running. Manla's entire body shook. The officer carefully wrote everything down. Every detail, every whisper, every truth that had been buried under layers of fear. Zuri, Manla said through tears, I failed you. I failed you in ways I will never forgive myself for. You didn't hurt me, Zuri whispered. She lied. But I believed her, Manla said brokenly. I believed her, and because of that, I didn't see you were fading right in front of me. Zuri leaned slowly onto his chest. He held her as though trying to piece together every part of her heart that had been shattered. The officer wiped her eyes discreetly. Zuri, your courage is extraordinary. Now that we have this, we can protect you. Completely, legally, permanently if needed. Zuri nodded, though tears still rolled silently down her cheeks. Now we have to talk about what comes next, the officer continued. Both Zuri and Manla stiffened. What does that mean? Manla asked. Kalia will face formal charges, Ms. Kagomotso said. Multiple counts of child abuse, neglect, endangerment, and psychological manipulation. Manla closed his eyes. Good. She deserves every consequence. The officer nodded. But while the case is ongoing, Zuri cannot return to your home. Not yet. He swallowed hard. I understand. She'll remain in the shelter for now, the officer explained. Eventually, once the courts review, we will evaluate whether you can take her home under supervision or if someone needs to step in as a temporary guardian. Like who? Zuri asked, softly, scared. The officer glanced at Thandeka. The teacher's heart skipped. She hadn't expected her name to be suggested. Miss Thandeka has expressed interest, the officer continued. If you are comfortable, she could take care of you temporarily. Zuri's eyes widened. Hope flickered. Would you like that? Thandeka asked gently. Zuri didn't hesitate. Yes, she whispered. Manla swallowed, eyes shining. I trust her. If I can't keep my daughter safe right now, then I want her with the person who can. They all exchanged a look, one filled with relief, fear, hope, grief, everything tangled together. Then Zuri spoke again. There's something else, she whispered. Something I didn't tell you. Everyone turned toward her. Zuri's fingers trembled. She didn't just hurt me, she whispered. She did something else, something worse. The room went still, and everyone knew the darkest secret was still waiting in the shadows. The air in the counseling room shifted instantly. What had been a fragile space of confession and comfort turned sharp, heavy electric. Everyone froze, Manla, Thandeka, the officer, each of them sensing that whatever Zuri had been holding back was far darker than anything she'd said before. Zuri pulled the blanket tighter around her small frame. Her lips trembled and her tiny shoulders curled inward as if she were trying to make herself invisible. Sweetheart, Miss Kagomotso whispered, you're safe now. Whatever you tell us, no one can hurt you for it. Zuri nodded, but fear shimmered in her eyes like a trembling flame. I didn't want anyone to know, she whispered. Because she said if I told, it would make Daddy go to prison. Mandla stiffened. What he breathed. Zuri, no. Nothing you say will make me. She said it would. Zuri choked. She said she had proof. She said she hid things. Hid what? The officer asked gently. Zuri hesitated. Her breathing quickened, becoming shallow. She took pictures, the girl whispered. She took pictures of my bruises and said she would tell the police you did it, Dad. Mandla felt his stomach cave in. Oh my God. Zuri continued, eyes unfocused, as though watching old scenes replay. She said she kept them on her phone. She said she saved all the messages. She said the police would believe her because she's an adult and I'm just a child. Miss Kagematsu's pen paused midair. You're saying she falsified evidence? Zuri nodded vigorously. She even made me say things on video. She told me to cry and say Daddy hit me. She said she needed it, just in case. The room erupted in shock. That's why she made you say, my dad did this. Thandeka murmured slowly, piecing things together. She was conditioning you. She told me to practice, Zuri whispered helplessly. She said if I practiced enough, it sounded real. Mandla felt physically sick. She was planning to frame me. The officer looked grim. Parents who are abusive sometimes do this to deflect blame or to control the narrative. This is extremely serious evidence against her. But Zuri wasn't finished. Her voice shook harder. There's more, she whispered. She didn't just take pictures of the bruises she made. Everyone leaned in. Zuri swallowed hard. She made me do things. A chill swept across the room. What things? Thandeka whispered, holding her breath. Zuri wiped her tears. She made me blame myself. She made me think everything was my fault. She said I was the reason Daddy didn't love her. She said Daddy wanted to leave her because of me. Mandla shook his head quickly. Zuri, that's not true. I know now, Zuri whispered, but back then, I believed her. Her voice cracked. She made me kneel on the salt once because she heard Daddy say he missed Mommy. She said I reminded him too much of her. She said if I acted less like Mommy, Daddy would be happy. Mandla felt tears burn in his eyes again. Zuri, he whispered, I would never. You look like your mother. Of course you do. But that has never ever been a reason for me to be angry with you. But the darkest part was still hiding in Zuri's trembling voice. And Zuri hesitated, chest tightening. She also made me hurt myself. The adults froze. What do you mean, sweetheart? The officer asked carefully. Zuri curled into a tighter ball. She made me scratch myself with a brush. On my legs, on my arms. She said if I didn't do it, she'd burn my hand on the stove. Horror rippled across the room. She said if she hurt me, it would leave marks like burns or cuts, and people might think she did it. But if I hurt myself, she said no one could blame her. Mandla covered his face, choking on a sob. Thandeka felt her own tears spill over. And when I cried, Zuri continued, she said I wasn't doing it right. She said I needed to cry quietly, or else the neighbors would hear. The silence that followed was suffocating. It took almost a full minute before anyone could speak. Zuri, Thandeka whispered, voice breaking. You lived in terror. The child only nodded. Miss Kagematsu's voice was steady but trembling with controlled fury. This confirms severe psychological torture, coercion, and manipulation, and it will strengthen the case. Zuri swallowed hard again. But that's not the worst thing, she whispered. Everyone tensed. What's worse, sweetheart? The officer encouraged gently. Zuri stared down at her hands, small, shaking, scarred faintly. She told me, if you ever tried to take me away, she would take something from you too. Something, Mandla echoed. She said she would take the memory of Mommy away. The adults looked confused for a heartbeat until Zuri clarified. She took Mommy's picture, Zuri whispered. The one in your drawer. The one Daddy kept. The one I used to sleep with sometimes when he wasn't home. Realization struck Mandla like a blow. His late wife's photograph, the last picture he had of her, had gone missing more than a year ago. He'd searched the house for days, weeks. Kalia had told him to let go of the past. You mean? Mandla whispered, voice trembling. She stole it. Zuri nodded. She tore it, she whispered. She tore the picture in front of me. She said Mommy was gone and I needed to forget her. She said Daddy would forget her too if I stopped asking about her. She said I shouldn't cry for Mommy because it annoyed her. A sound broke from Mandla, not anger this time, but pure gutted heartbreak. He doubled over, pressing a fist against his mouth, sobbing silently. Thandeka rubbed his back gently, tears falling just as heavily from her own eyes. Miss Kagomatsu wiped her cheeks carefully before speaking. Zuri, sweetheart, what you lived through is unspeakable. And we believe you. Every word. Will she come back? Zuri whispered. No, the officer said firmly. Absolutely not. She will not be allowed near you again. Courts will ensure it. Zuri trembled. Will Dad get in trouble because of her pictures? No, the officer reassured. Those images can be examined. Investigators will easily determine when the marks were made, how they were made, and by whom. And because she forced you to say his name, Thandeka added, that shows coercion. It actually protects your father, not harms him. Zuri clung to her father. Daddy, she whispered, I thought I ruined everything. Manla shook his head violently, lifting her chin so she could see the truth in his eyes. You saved me, he said. You saved yourself, and you saved our family from someone who never deserved to be part of it. Then why didn't you see it? Zuri asked softly. Manla closed his eyes, tears streaming. Because I was broken, and she took advantage of that. I should have protected you. I should have known. I should have seen. Zuri touched his cheek gently. It's okay now, she whispered. No, he said, pulling her into a tight but gentle embrace. It's not okay, but it will be. I swear to you, it will be. For the first time, Zuri didn't flinch in her father's arms. She leaned into him, and the healing, slow, painful, but real, began. But outside that warm room, the wheels of the legal system were turning rapidly. Kalia wasn't just facing charges. She was about to face the truth, and the truth alone had the power to break everything wide open. The courtroom was small, yet it felt suffocating, crowded not by people but by tension. Even though this was just the preliminary hearing, the atmosphere crackled with a heaviness that made every breath feel weighted. A single fluorescent light buzzed quietly above the judge's bench, flickering as though strained by the intensity unfolding beneath it. Zuri sat beside Miss Thandeka in the front row holding a stuffed elephant someone from the shelter had given her. Her small fingers dug into its soft ears whenever she grew anxious. Manla sat on her other side, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles white from the effort of holding himself together. Across the room, escorted by two officers, Kalia entered. The moment she stepped inside, Zuri shrank down in her seat, shoulders curling inward. She tried to make herself small, almost invisible. Kalia looked vastly different now. The polished elegance she once flaunted was gone. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, wrists cuffed. But what was most striking wasn't the physical disarray, it was her eyes. Wild, cold, unhinged. Her gaze swept the courtroom until it landed on Zuri. A twisted smile formed on her lips. Zuri whimpered softly and pressed into Manla's side. It's okay, he whispered fiercely. She has no power here. Not anymore. But fear doesn't obey truth, it obeys memory. And in Zuri's memory, Kalia had been the shadow that swallowed every corner of her home. The judge, a stern woman with deep lines of experience etched across her face, took her seat and called the room to order. We are here today to review charges of physical abuse, emotional manipulation, coercion, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice in the matter concerning minor Zuri Matlala. The accused, Miss Kalia Matlala, will have the opportunity to respond. Kalia sat back, crossing her arms. All lies, she muttered loud enough for the courtroom to hear. The judge's gaze snapped toward her. Miss Matlala, this court does not tolerate disruptions. You will remain silent unless addressed. Kalia smirked an expression so venomous it made the air colder. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, we have testimony from the minor photographic evidence retrieved from the defendant's phone interviews with shelter staff, physical assessments from pediatric specialists, and witness statements from the child's school. Proceed, the judge said. The prosecutor clicked a remote. A screen lit up on the wall. The first image appeared, a bruise deep ugly spread across a child's back. The courtroom gasped softly. Kalia rolled her eyes. That could be anything, she said. Kids fall. The prosecutor clicked again. Another image. Knees raw and scraping. Again. Red welts across small forearms. Again. A cupboard with scratch marks on the inside of the door. Your Honor, the prosecutor said these were recovered directly from the defendant's locked device. Metadata confirms the timing aligns with days when the child reported inexplicable injuries or emotional distress. Kalia's face twitched, not with remorse but with frustration. She's clumsy, she snapped. And the cupboard, maybe she hid there herself. How is that my fault? Manla jerked up, fists clenched. She was 10. You forced her inside. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Matlala remained seated. He sank back down, shaking with rage. Next, the prosecutor turned toward Zuri. "Sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling to meet her level. "Would you like to speak? Only if you feel ready?" Zuri froze. She looked at her father, at Miss Thandeka, at the judge, at Kalaya, who watched her with an expression so poisonous it made the girl recoil. Thandeka took her hand. "You don't have to be afraid. You only have to tell the truth." Another long pause. Then quietly but clearly, Zuri whispered, "I'll talk." The entire courtroom fell silent. Zuri stood slowly, shaking but standing. The judge nodded gently. "You may speak when ready." Zuri used both hands to grip her stuffed elephant, grounding herself. "She hurt me," she said. "A lot," Kalaya scoffed. The judge glared at her. Zuri continued. "She made me kneel on salt when I dropped something. She locked me in the cupboard when she got mad. She told me I was the reason Daddy didn't love her anymore." Her voice cracked. She told me Mommy died because she didn't want me." A collective gasp spread through the room. Manla covered his face, sobbing silently. Zuri blinked back tears. "She made me scratch myself. She told me to blame Daddy so no one would suspect her. She said if I didn't do what she said, she would burn me." "Lise!" Kalia screamed, shooting to her feet. Officers rushed to restrain her. The judge slammed her gavel. "Order Miss Matlala, you will remain silent or be removed." Kalaya glared daggers but sat back down. Zuri looked at her just once, then turned back to the judge. "She never wanted to be my mom," she whispered. "She wanted me gone." The judge softened. "Thank you, Zuri. You have shown bravery beyond your years." Zuri sat down again, shaking, and buried her face in her father's chest. Manla held her as if anchoring her to the earth. The courtroom was far from finished. Next came testimonies from teachers, neighbors, the shelter staff, and the forensic pediatric specialist who confirmed the bruises were consistent with repeated physical abuse, not accidental. Finally, Manla was called. He stood shaking, not out of fear of the court, but fear of confronting the truth about his own failures. "Mr. Matlala," the prosecutor asked gently, "did you ever witness your wife harming your daughter?" "No," he whispered. "But I should have. I should have seen the signs." "Did you ever physically discipline Zuri in the way she was instructed to say?" He shook his head firmly. "Never. I have yelled, I'm ashamed to admit that, but I have never laid a hand on her." The prosecutor nodded. "Do you believe your daughter Manla?" Looked at Zuri, eyes filled with tears. "With everything in me," he whispered. "And what would you like the court to know about your wife Manla?" Turned toward Kalaya. "She broke our home," he said. "She hurt my little girl. She lied to me, manipulated me. And when everything started to crumble, she tried to steal my daughter's voice." Kalia glared back, unrepentant. "Thank you," the prosecutor said gently. The judge reviewed everything with a slow, heavy breath. Then she delivered her verdict. "This court finds compelling evidence of severe emotional, physical, and psychological abuse inflicted upon the minor by the defendant. Pending final sentencing, Miss Kalia Matlala is hereby remanded without bail." Kalia erupted. "This is ridiculous. That girl ruined everything. That little brat." "Enough," the judge thundered. "Remove her immediately." Officers seized hair. She screamed all the way out of the courtroom, kicking and clawing, but her voice faded as the doors slammed shut. A hush settled over the room. The judge looked at Zuri. "You are safe now, child." Zuri nodded, tears streaming silently. Then the judge addressed Manla. "We will evaluate your capacity for custody with mandatory parenting support and therapy. Until then, temporary guardianship will be granted to Miss Thandeka and Cube, pending further review." Thandeka gasped quietly but nodded. Zuri looked up at her teacher with a trembling smile. "You're going to stay with me for now," Thandeka whispered, brushing a tear from Zuri's cheek. "And we're going to build something new, something safe." Zuri hugged both her teacher and her father tightly. She had testified. She had spoken her truth in front of everyone. And she had won. But even as the courtroom emptied, Manla approached Thandeka with a heavy, humbled expression. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing her when I didn't." Thandeka squeezed his hand. "You see her now. That's what matters." But beneath all the relief, guilt still clung to Manla like a shadow. He vowed silently, fiercely, he would spend the rest of his life becoming the father Zuri deserved. The weeks following the courtroom explosion unfolded in a fragile rhythm, part healing, part rebuilding, part learning what life looked like without fear. But for Zuri, the world still felt strange, like she was tiptoeing across thin ice, waiting for it to crack, even though everyone kept telling her it was finally safe. Miss Thandeka's home became her sanctuary. It was small, just a modest two-room flat above a quiet tailor shop, but to Zuri it felt enormous. Every corner was filled with softness, warm blankets, gentle lights, calming scents. Nothing slammed, nothing throbbed with anger, nothing stalked silently in the shadows, and most importantly, no one yelled. No one punished, no one hurt. Still, as days passed, the trauma clung to her like a second skin. Some nights she woke up screaming, calling for her mother, begging Kalia not to hurt her, begging her father not to be angry. Thandeka would sit beside her bed holding her hand until her trembling stopped. "You're safe," she whispered over and over. "You are safe." Zuri would eventually fall back asleep, but the woman stayed awake long after, unable to forget the horrors the child had endured. Meanwhile, Manla was undergoing a transformation of his own. He enrolled in parenting classes, signed up for alcohol-free support meetings, attended mandatory therapy sessions, and even without being asked, began volunteering at a local community kitchen. Every day he tried to peel away layers of guilt and become someone better, a father his daughter could return to without fear. Yet he struggled. Some nights he sat alone in his empty house, the one that still held traces of his wife before Kalia and the scars of the monster who followed, wondering how he had missed so much. How he had allowed darkness to creep into his home, unnoticed. He visited Zuri twice a week at Thandeka's flat. The visits were supervised at first, but as trust rebuilt itself slowly and steadily, permission was granted for the visits to become more natural. Every time Zuri opened the door and saw him, she smiled. A real smile. Small, but genuine. Every time she hugged him, he felt something inside him mend. But every time she flinched at a sudden sound, Manla's heart cracked again. Healing was not linear, and he knew he would spend years, maybe a lifetime, making up for the years she spent afraid. As for Kalia, she awaited sentencing from a holding facility. The news had spread far through the community, through church members, neighbors, old co-workers, even people who had once praised her for her polished exterior. The truth rotted her reputation faster than any storm, but she remained unrepentant. "Manipulative child," she muttered to anyone who would listen. "Ungrateful, ruined my life. That teacher witch, she turned them all against me." She lived in denial, refusing to accept that she alone was the architect of her destruction. Her sentencing date approached, and everyone involved braced themselves. When that day finally arrived, the courthouse was quieter than before, but the tension still sat heavily in the air. Zuri did not attend. The court protected her from further trauma. But Manla and Thandeka sat side by side, holding hands in shared hope. The judge reviewed the case with a firm, measured tone. "Miss Kalia Matlala, based on overwhelming evidence of gross psychological and physical abuse, coercion, falsification of testimony, child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and attempted interference with a protective investigation, this court sentences you to 15 years in prison with no chance of parole for the first 8. A gasp spread through the room, some of shock, some of relief, some of long overdue justice. Kalia's face twisted into something almost inhuman. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "He's lying. The girl is lying. That teacher, she tricked the child. Remove her," the judge ordered calmly. The officers grabbed her arms. As they dragged her out, her voice echoed through the courtroom. "Manla, you fool. She'll turn Zuri against you. They will all turn her against you. You'll lose her." Manla closed his eyes. Even her final words were poison. But now that poison had a cage. When Manla returned to the hallway, he found Thandeka on her phone. She looked up with a trembling smile. "She's with Ayanda," she said. "They're playing with dolls and drawing. She asked if she could make you a card." A tear slipped down Manla's cheek. "She's thinking of me," he whispered. "Every day," Thandeka said softly. They left the courthouse together, stepping into a bright afternoon. For the first time in many years, Manla felt like he could breathe. Not deeply yet, but enough. Later that evening, Zuri waited beside the window of Thandeka's apartment, holding her stuffed elephant. When she saw her father's familiar figure approaching the building, her face lit up. "Daddy," she called, running to the door. Manla opened it just in time for her to throw her arms around him. He laughed through his tears. "I missed you, baby." "I made you something," she said, proudly handing him a folded paper. Inside was a drawing of 3 people standing under a tree. Zuri, her father, and her teacher, all holding hands, all smiling. Manla knelt, hugging her tightly. "It's perfect. Thank you." Is she gone forever?" Zuri asked quietly. "Yes," he said gently. "She can't hurt you anymore." Zuri relaxed against him. but after a moment she pulled away and looked up at Thandeka with uncertain eyes. Miss T, does this mean I can stay with you forever? Thandeka froze. Manla swallowed hard. The officer had just told them earlier that the final decision whether Zuri would return permanently to Manla or stay long-term under guardianship would be made soon. No matter what happens, Thandeka said carefully, you will always have a home with me. Always, for as long as you need. And you'll always have me, Manla added, voice gentle, forever. No matter where you stay, you are my little girl. Zuri looked between them. Can I have both? She asked in a near whisper. Thandeka smiled. Yes, sweetheart, you can have both. Zuri exhaled in relief, hugging them both at once. And in that three-person embrace, raw, imperfect healing, something beautiful settled. A new kind of family, not built from traditional mold, but built from love, from survival, from courage, from the truth that had nearly destroyed them, but ultimately saved them. And though the road ahead would still be long, for the first time they were walking it together. Life after the sentencing did not transform overnight. It shifted gently like soft waves rolling over the shore, reshaping the sand grain by grain. The wounds were still there, but the danger was gone. And without that shadow hovering over her, Zuri slowly began to breathe in ways she hadn't dared to before. The court granted temporary guardianship to Miss Thandeka with regular supervised visitations and therapeutic sessions for Manla and Zuri. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was one built with safety at its center. For the first time in years, Zuri woke up in a home where mornings weren't filled with tense footsteps or the smell of anger simmering from the kitchen. Instead, she woke to gentle sunlight, to the quiet hum of a kettle boiling, to the soft sound of pages turning as Thandeka grated papers on the sofa. In the first few days, Zuri hovered like a small ghost, following her teacher, silently afraid of being out of sight for too long. She carried her stuffed elephant everywhere, even to the bathroom and kitchen. The trauma ran deep. Once she accidentally dropped a cup and it shattered on the floor. The sound echoed loudly in the tiny apartment, and Zuri froze mid-breath. Her entire body stiffened, her hands shot up defensively, and she whispered, I'm sorry, please don't make me kneel, please. Thandeka rushed to her immediately, crushing her into a gentle hug. Zuri, sweetheart, look at me, she said, cupping the child's cheeks. No one here will ever make you kneel. No one will punish you. It was just a cup. Zuri sobbed in relief, the fear inside her spilling out like shattered glass. Such moments were common at first, flashbacks, nightmares, sudden tremors, but Thandeka never once tired of comforting her. She was determined to be the safe place Zuri had never been given. As weeks passed, Zuri slowly rediscovered small joys of childhood. She started drawing again, this time landscapes and animals instead of dark corners and crying figures. She talked more with Ayanda, who visited often with handmade bracelets and stories from school. She began humming while brushing her hair. She even tried helping Thandeka cook something she'd once been petrified of doing, since kitchens held too many memories of punishment. The progress was slow but steady. And Manla, who had once been so fractured he could barely lift his head, was transforming too. Every session with his therapist peeled away layers of guilt and grief. He attended anger management workshops and actively worked on rebuilding patience. He listened as he'd never listened before. He learned how to speak gently, how to reassure instead of react. His visits with Zuri blossomed into moments of healing. They painted together, ate ice cream on park benches, sat under big trees talking about mommy, something they hadn't done in years because grief had been too sharp. One afternoon, Zuri shyly asked if she could visit their old home. Are you sure? Manla asked softly. She nodded. He took her on a Saturday morning. Walking through the silent house, Zuri hesitated at the doorway to her old room. The walls still held faint photos she'd drawn years ago. The floor still remembered her footsteps. But there were memories mixed inside the corners now, some warm, some terrifying. She crossed the room slowly, then put her small hand on her father's. Can we paint the walls one day? She asked. I want new colors. Manla's voice broke. Yes, he whispered, any colors you want. It was the beginning of reclaiming the home, not erasing the pain, but reshaping it. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening, the three of them, Zuri, Manla, and Thandeka, attended a family healing program at a local community center. Zuri's therapist, a gentle woman with bright scarves, guided her through exercises using storytelling and role play. One afternoon, she gave Zuri a set of wooden puppets and asked, Can you show me what used to happen at home? Zuri hesitated. Then she picked up a small puppet with curly hair representing herself and another with sharp features representing Kalia. She moved the puppets in a tense choreography, mimicking punishment, fear, obedience, and then she said something no one expected. She said, "If I told the truth, Daddy would hate me forever." The therapist looked at Mandla. "Do you want to respond to that?" He knelt beside his daughter, tears welling. "Zuri, I could never hate you, never. You are the best part of me." She stared at him searching, and this time she believed him. Her shoulders relaxed, a small victory. As spring drew closer, Zuri returned to school full-time. Students welcomed her back with drawings, sweets, and handmade cards. Teachers formed a protective circle around her, watching, listening, guarding. She sat with Ayanda in class, whispering jokes and sharing pencils. And one afternoon after school, Zuri asked something that melted Thandeka's heart. "Miss T, can I call you Auntie sometimes?" Thandeka's eyes filled. "Of course you can." From that day on, she became Auntie T. But the most powerful moment came one evening at the community center during a group art activity. The instructor asked the children to draw what safety looks like to you. Zuri sat quietly thinking. She began drawing slowly, carefully. When she was done, she showed it to her father and Thandeka. In the picture, a small girl stood between two adults. The girl wore a bright yellow dress. One adult wore a blue shirt, Mandla. The other wore a green blouse, Thandeka. They all held hands beneath a big tree, and above them, written in small, careful handwriting, "This is home." Tears streamed silently down Mandla's cheeks. Thandeka hugged the child tightly. Zuri smiled shyly, a quiet light glowing in her eyes. She was beginning to heal, not because the pain was gone, but because she was no longer healing alone. One warm Sunday morning, Mandla arrived early to take Zuri to the park. He looked healthier now, his face brighter, his shoulders no longer heavy with the crushing weight of guilt. Zuri ran into his arms eagerly. "Daddy, Daddy, look, I learned how to braid Auntie T's hair." She proudly held up a tiny braid she'd practiced on a doll. Mandla laughed warmly. "That's beautiful, baby." While they gathered her things, Thandeka watched them with a full heart. Mandla approached her quietly. "Thandeka, I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," she replied. "You owe her love. And you're giving that." He nodded slowly. "One day, when the court is ready, I want Zuri to live with me again. But only if she feels safe, and only if you remain part of her life." Thandeka smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere." Zuri slipped her hand into both of theirs. "Can we all go to the park together today?" she asked brightly. They looked at each other, smiled, and answered at the same time, "Yes." As they walked outside the morning sun, warming their faces, Zuri skipped ahead, her laughter echoing like music across the street. For the first time in a very long time, her laughter was free. And she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to live. In life, the smallest voices often carry the heaviest truths. Zuri's journey reminds us that children see and feel far more than we imagine. Behind every silence may hide a plea for help. Behind every frightened glance, a story too painful to speak aloud. True strength comes not from perfection, but from choosing to protect, to believe, and to stand up even when the truth is hard to face. Healing is not a straight line. It takes time, patience, and love from people willing to listen without judgment. And sometimes family is not just blood, it is anyone who steps in with open arms when the world turns dark. If you are watching this story today, may it encourage you to pay attention to the quiet ones, to show kindness, to speak up, and to be a safe place for someone who needs it. Share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from and what time is it? If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more powerful African folktale dramas.